Hi everyone, here we will discuss about the float wrapper class. Class float is a wrapper for values which are stored with the primitive data type float. Float objects can be constructed with a float value, for example 1.5, which is stored in the variable x, right? Likewise, the string also may contain the float value. For example, a string str may store the value here 2.1 within the double quotes. So this is the numerical value stored as a string. As per this statement, we are having two constructors for the float class name, and which is receiving the number as a argument, which is the float data type, and here the float constructor which is receiving the string as a argument. Here the string is representing the floating point value, otherwise at least a number. You can pass the number also, it will take as a 2.0 after transforming into float or after converting into float. Suppose if you pass the alphabet as a string, then it will give you the exception that is called number format exception. The string should give the number as a string. It should not pass the alphabets as a string. And the few methods are having in float wrapper class. Here parse float, which is receiving the string and converting into the floating value by using parse float. Here if number is passing as a string, it will not throw the exception. If you are passing the alphabet as a string, then there is the possibility of exception, that is number format exception. Then we can use the float value method. When we are passing the float value in the object, it will return the value of that object as a float value. And the example is given, main class name, and main method is defined here. Then I am passing the floating point primitive data type variable x. Then here I am converting that primitive data type value into wrapper class data type float by using the constructor, then here which is stored in the object. So now in this context, we are transforming the primitive data type value into, right, as a object. So now the object obj1 is having the value which is passing as a 98.4. that is what displaying here. Then we are going to pass the string as a input. That means the numerical number which is stored as a string, that numerical number is represented as a string. That string is converted into the object by using float wrapper class. So here the second constructor, okay, the float and the string, here str, this is the constructor we have seen in the previous slide. As per this syntax, we are passing the string as a argument, and which is converting into float value. So that is displaying here as a second statement output based upon this statement. Now we are passing the value, assigning the string value into the str variable, that is a string. Then using parseFloat is the method which is converting that string into floating point value, that is here using the float wrapper class. This is having the object, right? Object is a string, right? So which is having the value, that value is converted into the primitive data type float, that is stored in the ret value. So now which is printing the primitive data type value. In this context, object is transforming into primitive data type value, right? So now two things we have seen: primitive is transforming into object, here object is transforming into primitive data type. So finally we are getting the output as a primitive data type float 1001.0. Here you see we passed the string as a floating point value 1000, sorry, numerical number 1001, right? Then which is converting that 1001 into floating point value, which is giving the single digit after the decimal point. Now one more example is given here. as per the constructor second one, we are going to pass the string as a argument, but here instead of passing the value, numerical value, we are passing alphabets as a string. If you do that, then there is the possibility of exception. So number format exception will happen here. Okay, that's what you look at that exception in thread main java.language number format exception for input string is high. Okay, so here actually we should pass the numerical number as a input. That's why we are getting this exception. Okay, so since the exception is occurring here, we did not handle that exception. Actually, look at that. If you handle that exception, throws exception or try catch statements, then it will execute this below statement. Since we did not handle the exception, it is giving you the error during the compilation time, that number format exception error. Then one more example is given here. Just we are assigning the null value to the string, then that null is passing as a argument here. So now again exception will occur. Actually we should pass a numerical number as a string, but here we are passing null value as a string. So now here also we will get exception. That exception is here null pointer exception. So if you handle that exception by using try catch or throw, then we can handle that and below statement will execute. But here we did not handle that exception here, so which is stopping the execution during the compilation time. And another one example is given here. By receiving the user input during the runtime of the program, enter the number that, but here we are asking the number, but we are receiving the string as a input. You look at that, we are passing null. Okay, here we are passing null, right? So since it is passing the null cannot be converted into the floating point here. Okay, so here actually this is small f. Okay, this is small f. Okay, right, floating point primitive data type. So here we are handling the exception, right, number format exception, but it is not suitable in this location, number format exception. So you see, which is giving null value. So null value should be handled by null pointer exception. You look at that, this one. So you look at here I am passing null. That's why we are getting this exception. But here you see I am passing second time as input as, right, welcome. Okay, here I am giving the input as welcome in this location. This is small f. Here I am passing welcome, right, this is a string, right? But previously I passed null. Two times I executed this program. First time this one I got number format exception. Here the value which is given as a null. Here we are passing the welcome, right? So welcome is the value here, which is also raising the number format exception. Okay, because we should give the number as a string here. That is the problem, right? So we have to enter valid integer. That's what we are giving here, null pointer exception. Okay, so like this we can handle the exceptions in the float wrapper class, right, if you pass the values which are not valid. Thanks for watching.